My name is Sanjay Kak, and I'm here to talk about my new film, Jashn-e-Azadi, also known as How We Celebrate Freedom.
Kashmir stood on the fault lines of that partition, claimed by both India and Pakistan. A year later, there were two Kashmirs.
You know, in Indian sort of public life, Kashmir is such a sensitive and important and huge thing that to even think of doing a film on it has been quite a daunting thing. It's something that one has very vaguely thought of for many years, but never worked up the courage to take it on. What complicates matters is that I'm also a Kashmiri, and therefore going back and trying to come to terms with what's going on is not easy. As an Indian filmmaker, it's an attempt by me to interrogate that silence both about Kashmir and in Kashmir, and give a sense of what people are feeling. When you're shooting a film in the ways in which I end up, at least the last few films, making them in the ways I have, there isn't like a big plan, there isn't a script, there's not a lot that one can plan, because that's the kind of story you're doing. So you sort of anticipate some situations, and then you place yourself in those situations, and then you hope something is happening. And my camera person, Ranjan Palit, who's also a filmmaker and one of the most outstanding cinematographers in India, he's usually very quiet when we are shooting, and we don't talk a lot, and he just does his stuff. But once in a while, we'll shoot something, and then when we get back into the car at the end of the day, he'll turn to me and say, film ban gaya, which translates as, the film is made, because he has that experience of knowing that, say, what we shot today is real stuff. So, for example, on Eid Day, which is the sort of annual celebration in winter, it's snowing outside, and on an impulse, after shooting the mosque and people on the street, we decide to go to the graveyard, which is the martyrs' graveyard, just to see if somebody will be there. And sure enough, this man walks in. It's a totally unanticipated moment. And he talks to us very briefly and disappears as quickly as he comes. It was a conscious decision actually to leave what could have been a sort of blood and gore and human tragedy epic. A film 2 hours 19 minutes long about Kashmir can very well qualify to be that, in favor of not a obscure way of dealing with it, but a more tangential way of dealing with it. When you're very explicit about something, your audience has a very easy time of it. This is violence, I like it or don't like it. This is tragedy, how terrible. But sometimes by leaving it unsaid and unstated and tangential, it has the capacity to actually disturb people more. Precisely because you are not doing a kind of standard format film where, it's mandatory for you to cover all sides. There is, side A, side B, side C, side D, whatever, how many sides there are to an argument. I knew from the beginning that an attempt to do something like that would actually dilute the political purpose of my film, which was to try and deflect discussion on Kashmir into a different direction. And that direction was to get away from the obsession about Kashmir being something between India and Pakistan, that to look at Kashmir. So it was not out of some perversity that I left these things out, but as a political filmmaker, it was a tactical choice. That I know every time I show this film, people are going to ask me these questions, some people will get angry, some people will get very angry, but I'll deal with it. Because I'm not there to please the audience. That's not the way I see my role as a documentary filmmaker. It's not that I want to annoy them. I would like them to enjoy my film and like me. But if they are going to have a problem, that's all right. Certainly, I know in Kashmir, it's very, common speech is very guarded. So how do you look for ways in which you can elicit what people are feeling about their environment? I looked at prose, short stories, but all that is print journalism. It's very guarded. People not really committing, to saying anything about what they truly feel. But the poetry works. People always ask about it and are struck by it. And that's not something that you would expect in a film that is talking about the present of a disturbed area, that people will be talking about its poetry. And to me, that's also resistance. Resistance is not just the act of carrying a weapon. It's also writing and poetry and so on. If you see yourself as an independent filmmaker, and I mean that in every sense of the word, one of the things I was very careful to do in Kashmir was, till I finished shooting, and actually till I made the rough cut, I didn't even go to anybody for funding. Okay? Now that's not always possible, because things cost a lot and so on. But for Kashmir, I could handle it. I had a place to stay, just a small crew, I had my own equipment. Why did I do that? Because it was very important for me not just to be able to tell people that I have no agenda other than my own, but I should also feel that way. You understand? If I had a funder, for example, who told me it's got to be a 1-hour film and can we have 3 interesting characters, it would be a different film. I think that there are some huge and very important stories that remain totally unsaid, and I'll be the first to admit that my film doesn't even scratch the surface, and I want to pay some attention to that. I think that there is a lot of important work that needs to be done.